Alright, let's talk about one of the strangest and most controversial Christian practices in America. Snake handling. Yes, it's real. Yes, it still happens. And no, it's not referring to a circus act. You may have seen this in movies or something that you find at like a big tent revival service. It's a religious ritual that's rooted in a specific interpretation of scripture. This comes from Mark 16, 17, and 18, which says, "And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons, they will speak in new tongues, they will pick up snakes with their hands, and when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all." So this is primarily practiced in certain Pentecostal churches in rural America. And the big question is, are these people faithfully obeying Jesus or dangerously missing the point? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So snake handling. I mean, Jesus did say if you believe, if you have faith, you should be able to handle a snake with your hands. And we actually see an example of this in Acts. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood and he put it on the fire. A viper driven out by the heat fastened itself onto his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging there from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live." But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up and suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. Cool. So some believers would argue that if Jesus says we should be able to handle venomous snakes, then this is a way that we should test our faith. So during worship services, they'll sometimes pull out venomous snakes, typically rattlesnakes or copperheads, and handle them as an act of obedience, of spiritual boldness. But is this really what Jesus meant for us to be doing? It does seem a little bit at odds with the other things that Jesus has said and taught. For example, when Satan was trying to get Jesus to demonstrate his faith, in Matthew 4:7, he answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." But maybe this is a little bit of a different context because Jesus was rebuking Satan. The context of snake handling may be about testing our faith. James 1:2-3 says, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So trials expose what we truly believe. They refine our convictions. They draw us closer to Christ. However, facing trials and having our faith tested naturally is a little bit different than intentionally putting ourselves in harm's way. And even if we take Jesus' words at face value, he's not commanding us to handle snakes. He's describing signs that will accompany those who believe in the gospel. It's descriptive, not prescriptive. It's not an act that he wanted us to repeat. It's a byproduct of faith. Think about Acts 28, when Paul's bitten by the viper and he just shakes it off. This wasn't a worship stunt, it was a miracle during his mission. Paul didn't go looking for a snake to prove his faith. He was simply doing what God called him to do, and God protected him when he was attacked by it. I believe that's the spirit of the text here. God performs miracles, and he protects people who are serving him. This is different than manufacturing a danger to test God. It's not trusting God in the face of risk, it's creating risk to prove that God is going to heal you and do what he says. It's a distortion of a biblical truth. But it's human nature to do this. The ancient Israelites rebelled against God when they did this in Exodus 17:7. And he called the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" See, testing God flips the relationship. It makes him the servant and us the judge. If you happen to get bitten by a snake and trust in God to heal you, this is humble. If you intentionally put yourself in harm's way to see God work, this is manipulative. But additionally, that passage in Mark is a disputed passage. What I mean by this is that a lot of scholars believe that the last portion of Mark, chapter 16, verses 19-20, were not in the earliest manuscripts of the gospel. They were added later on. This does not mean that they're incorrect, but it is something to keep in mind that they're somewhat controversial to begin with. So maybe don't pick this specific verse to bet your life on. So know, at the end of the day, could God protect you and heal you if you drink poison or get bitten by a snake? Absolutely. But this is not the point of this scripture. Faith isn't measured by how risky you're willing to be. Faith is measured by how close you are in following Christ. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel. I'll use the verses used today in the description. Also leave a comment, that helps out as well. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology, and remember, you get what you pay for.